In every village, there is that one man who talks too much, and there is that one man who listens too little. But what happens when the one who talks the most suddenly goes quiet? What happens when the preacher steps away from the pulpit and stands outside the gate like a beggar? This story comes from a small village near the Great Lake Victoria, where the fish jump high and the fishermen sing as they cast down their nets. Pastor Juma was young, full of energy, full of words. Every Sunday, the church was packed because people wanted to hear him speak. His voice was like thunder on the mountain, and his words rolled out like waves crashing against the shore. But not everyone was happy. The people whispered, "His words are many, but our burdens remain." In the back of the church sat an old woman, Mama Zawadi. She came every Sunday, but she never smiled. One Sunday after the service, as people shook the pastor's hand and praised the sermon, Mama Zawadi stood still. "Hey, Pastor, your words are sweet, like ripe mangoes. But tell me, when will you taste the sour fruit of listening?" "Mama, what do you mean?" "You preach well, but you do not know the troubles of your people. You speak about love, but do you hear the cries of the widow? Do you know the sorrows of the drunkard's wife? You are inside these walls, but we are outside." That night, Pastor Juma could not sleep. Mama Zawadi's words buzzed in his ears like stubborn mosquitoes. His mind raced. He walked back and forth in his small room, whispering prayers that felt too weak to answer the questions of his heart. The next morning, the villagers were shocked. Pastor Juma did not stand at the altar. Instead, he stood outside the church gate, quiet, alone. In his hands, a small wooden sign that read, "I am here to listen." Day one, people laughed. "Eh? Has the pastor lost his mind? Maybe he wants to show us he is humble. Or maybe pride has made him foolish." Day two, still he stood there. Day five, the sun burned his skin, but he did not move. Day seven, a young woman approached. Her name was Achien. She was weeping. "Pastor, my husband beats me, and I have no one to tell." Juma listened. He did not preach. He did not advise. He just listened. More days passed. Slowly, others came. The drunkard confessed his shame. The farmer spoke of his hunger. The orphan boy shared his loneliness. Even the strong fisherman, Omonzi, came and spoke of his secret. Fear of the deep waters where his father had drowned. Every morning, Juma stood at the gate, silent and listening. But not everyone was pleased. The church elders, Mzee Bakara, Mama Zawadi, Uncle Musa, and Elder Nyoka, met in secret under the big acacia tree. Uncle Musa grumbling, "This boy is shaming us. A pastor standing at the gate like a madman?" Elder Nyoka said, "It is disrespectful. The people will lose faith in the church." Mama Baraka reluctantly said, "Maybe he means well, but this is not the way of our fathers." Mama Zawadi said calmly, "You are quick to defend the old ways, but slow to see the sickness in our minds." The elders decided they could not sit quietly and watch this shame continue. They called for a private meeting under the cover of darkness. Uncle Musa said angrily, "The people are gathering at the gate like goats at the market. They no longer respect the altar." Elder Nyoka, grinding his teeth, said, "This boy, this Juma, this pastor, he thinks he is wiser than the elders. We must remind him of his place." Zay Baraka said thoughtfully, "But the people, they are speaking things they have never dared to say before." Elder Nyoka, snapping, said angrily, "Nonsense. This is rebellion, and rebellion must be crushed." Mama Zawadi said quietly, "Crushing truth does not kill it, Nyoka. It only makes it louder." But Elder Nyoka will not be calmed. With the support of Uncle Musa, they wrote a letter to Father Elijah, the spiritual director, who lived far away in the city of Nairobi, a man known across the region for his stern leadership and unwavering discipline. The letter accused Pastor Juma of abandoning his duties, dishonoring the pulpit, and leading the people into spiritual confusion. They sent Kipchridge, a young messenger, riding his bicycle across hills and valleys to deliver the letter. When Father Elijah read the letter, he bowed forward. His fingers tapped the table as he listened to the elders' words in his mind. Father Elijah said firmly, "A shepherd who abandons the altar has lost his way. I will go and see this for myself." By the 30th day of Juma's silent stand, Father Elijah arrived at the village with a small team of respected church officials. The news of his arrival spread quickly. The villagers gathered, their hearts pounding with fear and curiosity. They knew Father Elijah's reputation. He was not a man who tolerated disobedience. Standing tall in his long dark robe, Father Elijah walked straight to the gate where Juma stood. and said sternly, Juma, what is this I hear? You abandon your duty as shepherd? You refuse the pulpit where the word must be spoken? Juma, bowing down his head calmly, said, Father, I have not abandoned the people. I am listening to them. Father Elijah said, raising his voice, listening? Is that your calling? You were trained as the pastor to preach. The people stood frozen. Some lowered their heads. Others clenched their fists. Then Mama Zawadi, leaning on her stick, stepped forward once again. Father Elijah, when was the last time you listened to the cry of the people? The words of the pulpit are many, but the ears of the leaders are few. The crowd murmured, tension in the air. But before Father Elijah could respond to Mama Zawadi's words, something even more powerful was already staring beyond the village. The wall outside the village had sharp eyes and sharper tongues. One afternoon, a young visitor from the city, a blogger named Sifa, arrived. She came out of curiosity, but left with photos and videos of Pastor Juma silently standing at the gate. The long line of villagers behind him, the tears on their faces, and the expressions in their words. The next day, the internet exploded. Pastor gone mad. Deserting the pulpit. Is this leadership or laziness? False humility or manipulation? The case of the listening pastor. On Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp, the story spread like wildfire. Memes were made. Debates flared. A radio host said, so, this is the new way? Pastors now mute like goats? They listen while the world burns? Even national television picked it up. Commentators argued. Some called it a spiritual awakening. Others called it a disgrace. Sponsors of the church began to withdraw their support. Some donors wrote letters demanding Pastor Juma's resignation. One of the regional bishops went on record. He said, we are watching a young man destroy not only his ministry, but the respect of the cloth, of the collar itself. The pressure was heavy. Nima could barely step outside without hearing whispers. The children, Baraka and Asha, were mocked at school. Nima is Pastor Juma's wife, and Baraka and Asha are his children. The first child bully said to his child, look, there goes the pastor's boy. Maybe he will listen to your crying instead of your lessons. But in the middle of the storm, something unexpected happened. Messages began to arrive from strangers across the country. Pastor Juma, my son has been addicted to alcohol for years. I wish someone in our church would just listen to me the way you are listening to your people. Another letter read in an elderly man's voice. You are not mad, Pastor. You are doing what many of us only dream of doing, being still enough to hear the pain we carry. The scandal was loud, but the silent support was growing like roots beneath the surface. And this, my children, is what made the investigators rush their judgment. They came not only because of the elders' complaints, but because the world was now watching. On the 36th day, the investigators returned, this time with written orders, sealed with the mark of the council. Pastor Juma, they read aloud, by the authority of the regional church council, you are hereby suspended from your pastoral duties until this matter is resolved. There was gasps from the villagers, murmurs, angers, and disbelief all over the place. The second investigator said, leave this place immediately or face excommunication. Juma remained silent, his eyes lowered. But before he could respond, young Baraka stepped forward, holding tightly to his father's rope, voice trembling but strong. If my father lives, we will all live. The villagers echoed. If Juma goes, so do we. The second villager, we have found healing here. We will not give up. Mama Zawadi raised her staff high into the air and said, you can remove a man from the gate, but you cannot silence the hearts of the people. You can remove a man from the gate, but you cannot silence the hearts of the people. The investigators exchanged nervous glances. To force Juma out would mean forcing out the entire village. But that night, away from the crowd, under the stars, Juma's heart trembled. Alone, kneeling in the dust, he whispered the question that weighed heavy on his spirit. Pastor Juma prayed softly, Lord, have I done wrong? Have I failed my family, my calling, my people? Nima, his wife, found him there, shoulders shaking. She said gently, you have not failed, my husband. Even Moses was questioned by his own people. Stay your course. The next morning, the villagers all gathered in the village square. Men, women, children, even the fishermen from the lake and the farmers from the hills stood together, faces set with determination. The investigators returned, ready to enforce their order. But what they meant was not fear, it was unity. The lead investigator said firmly, Pastor Juma, step away from the gate. Leave now. But Mama Zawadi stepped forward again, lifting her staff. With a very strong voice, she said, you may order him to leave, but who will you order to forget what we have found here? You may order him to leave, but who will order us to forget what we have found here? Who will silence the voice of our hearts? The crowd roared in agreement. Yon Kirich, the messenger boy, who once carried the letter of complaint, now stood at the front of the crowd in defiance. You can suspend a pastor, but can you suspend the truth? The investigators grew uneasy. Disobedience to the council is punishable, the second investigator warned. But one by one, the villagers stepped forward. I was broken, and he listened. I was lost, and he stood with me. Even Nima took her place beside her husband, holding his hand firmly. Their children, Baraka and Asha, at her side. Then came the shock that broke the investigator's will. Elder Nyoka, the very man who had led the charge against Pastor Juma, stood forward, but his soldiers sat under the weight of shame. Elder Nyoka, voice breaking, he said, I accused him. I called him a rebel. But my own son came to this gate, spoke his heart, and I heard him for the first time. Tears rolled down the old man's cheek. Forgive me. The village held its breath. Then slowly, like the rising of the sun, voices joined together, not in anger, but in song, a soft hymn of unity, of hope. The investigators, now powerless, lowered their scrolls. Father Elijah stood amongst them, watching. His stern face softened. He stepped forward. Perhaps we have been too quick to condemn. Perhaps listening is also a form of leadership. The people nodded, tears shining in their eyes. And in that moment, the seed of change was planted, not just in the village, but across the land. The scandal that had once threatened to ruin Pastor Juma became the soil from which healing grew. In the weeks that followed, the story of the village spread far. Beyond its dusty roads, journalists from across the nation came, not to mock like last time, but to learn. They recorded the voices of the people, the testimonies of healing, the confessions of the broken. One reporter asked Pastor Juma directly, Pastor Juma, what do you hope to achieve by all this? And he said calmly, I hope that by listening to one another, we can remember what it means to be human. This simple answer ignited a movement. Letters began to pour in from other pastors. Pastor Juma, we mocked you, but now we want to learn. Teach us how to listen. One Sunday morning, Pastor Ruben, alongside 5 other young pastors, stood before their congregation and made an announcement. Pastor Ruben said, for the next 40 days, we will close our mouths and open our ears. Our doors will be open, not for preaching, but for listening. It was called the listening fast. The idea spread like wildfire. Churches across the region adopted the practice. Leaders, once proud and untouchable, now sat among the people, asking softly, "Tell me your sorrow." Elders who had never knelt nor bowed their heads, hearing the grief of the youth. Elders who have never knelt now bowed their heads, hearing the grief of the youth. Wives who had been silent for years found their voices. Husbands wept without shame. In Juma's village, a new tradition began. Every year for 40 days, the church shut its pulpit and opened its gates. The people came not for sermons, but to speak, to be heard, and to heal. Father Elijah returns quietly one afternoon, this time not to condemn, but to participate. He removed his robe, sat amongst the villagers, and listened. In his voice, he admitted, "We were wrong to call you mad. You reminded us of the voice of the Spirit, the one that speaks in silence between words." The listening fast became a pillar of the community, a reminder that leadership is not only about speaking, but about hearing. Not only about standing tall, but about kneeling low. The story of Juma, the pastor who stood out of the gate, became a legend told across firesides and gathering places far beyond the borders of the village. I would like to ask you something. What is the use of a mouth full of sweet words if the ears remain closed like the doors of a locked heart? Pastor Juma's story teaches us one truth. Leadership is not in how loud you speak, but in how deeply you listen. The ear is the gate to the heart. And when the gate is closed, even love stands outside like a stranger. How many times have we silenced the voice of those who are closer to us? The child who asks, "Will you hear my dream?" The wife who whispers her pain. The neighbor who hides his struggle behind a smile. We often rush to give answers, but forget to give space for the question. Remember the old saying from the wise: the one who listens builds bridges. The one who only speaks builds walls. So tonight, as the stars watch over us, I challenge you, yes, you, sitting there and listening to me. Whose story have you not heard? Who is waiting for you to listen? And in your home, your workplace, your community, are you a builder of walls or a builder of bridges? The story of Pastor Juma is not just about a pastor. It is about each one of us. The courage to be still, the strength to listen, the humility to learn. Good night, my friends, and may your ears always remain open. Now, if this story touched your heart, if it made you think, smile, or even shed a tear, please, my friends, don't forget to like the video. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire, that are challenging, and that brings healing. Hit the notification bell so you will never miss when we light the fire again. And share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes The best gift you can give is simply to listen. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay blessed and still listening. God bless you.